A couple of minutes before we formally start the webinar, I want to just ask, what is it that you guys want to get out of this session? Let's um, let's put in a short answer pod, and why don't you put in your responses here as to what is it that you want to get out of this session? Or what outcome are you looking for? Okay, structured way to get to the 750 plus score. Let's get a few more inputs here. Starting point, structure, first attempt. All right, effective plan to get to the target score. All right, how can working professionals focus on what's important to prepare? Okay, that's a good question. To understand if my target score is possible in a month, all right. Stuck in at V30, want to improve it to 750, or improve that verbal score so that you can score 750 in the next 45 days. That's good. All right. .680 want to improve to 740. All right, that's really good as well. All right, so that's quite a few responses, and yeah, so we'll address all of these questions in due course in this session. So definitely, you know what you should get what you've come for. Okay, if you have a week to go, need tips. I think that's just too short a time. I can tell you that's probably the only place where I disappoint you. If you have a week and you want to say, hey, somehow increase my score by 100 points, not going to happen that way. But yes, if you have 20, 25 days, a month or more, and you want to get to a certain score, I can definitely give you a plan. If you have a week, then, you know, go out of the session and do what you've been doing, revise what you've been revising. That's kind of the best advice that I can give you at this point. I don't like people changing their strategies a week before the test. It turns out to, it's counterproductive. All right, with that, let's kind of get on with the session. So let me introduce myself. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to score 760. My name is Rajat Sudana. For those of you who don't know me, I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Supporting me in this webinar, we have Sandeep, who's a senior GMAT strategy expert. He's been with e-GMAT for over 5 years, and he's going to make sure that, you know, throughout this webinar, if you have questions that you post, good logical questions that is, as you post them, your questions get answered. Now, for those of you who don't know a whole lot about e-GMAT, we offer a very comprehensive free trial. We offer a free trial where you can go through a limited amount of content in sentence correction, critical reasoning, reading comprehension, and then various aspects of quant such as number properties, algebra, and geometry. So definitely try that out. We have some concepts that are listed on the top left-hand corner, but again, as you log into the free trial, you should be able to get to it. We also have some upcoming webinars. We have an algebra webinar that is tomorrow. Okay, so so that's something that if you need help in inequalities and absolute value, this is something that you should definitely check out. We also have a GMAT sentence correction webinar that is next week. If SC is your nemesis, if it's an area where you need help, in this webinar we talk about the meaning-based approach that e-GMAT pioneered a decade ago, and you know, we're still known for this approach. In this webinar, we're going to talk about that third generation of that approach. So again, you can click on that register now button and get to it. Also, this Thursday we have we're very excited to launch PACE, our PACE engine. It's you know, at e-GMAT we've always delivered personalized study plan, personalized feedback. Now with PACE we are also we'll also begin to deliver personalized courses for you. And this is essentially a launch of what PACE is and how it will change how you learn. How it'll help you get to that target GMAT score faster and with much higher efficacy. All right, with that, let's kind of get to know you guys a bit better. So I want to know when is it that you plan to take the test, and let's kind of get to know what your target GMAT score is. So what is your target GMAT score? All right, let's get a few more responses. In general, when I look at the data over here, I'm going to look at the first question is when is that people plan to take the GMAT? 32% of the classes in the next, they haven't taken a date as of yet. Presumably, you haven't started preparing. Another 25% have more than a month and a half, so it's about 60% of the class, give or take, and then another 40% is in the next 45 days. You're about 10% in the next 15 days as well. Also, with regards to the target GMAT scores, 730 to 750, biggest group, 760 plus is also a fairly large segment. So these two segments together account for about 75% or 73% to be exact. And then the remaining 26% or so are in that either in that 660 to 700 or in that 700 to 720 group. All right, that's wonderful. With that, let's go right into the webinar pane. Let me just walk you through the three parts that you see over here. In the middle, you see a presentation part. This is where I'll have the content. I'll be talking to that content, and essentially we'll pretty much get all the questions that you'd asked early on in the webinar answered in this session through this. Below the presentation part is a Q&A part. The Q&A part is for your questions. Okay, so if you have a question during the session, post that question in the Q&A part. If I think that's a question that many people will have, I'll respond to it. If I think that question is a bit more personal, then Sandeep will take that on and will respond to you. Either way, you'll get your questions answered as long as they are in context of what we are talking about. If you have questions that are completely out of context, for example, if you ask a question as how do I improve in absolute values, or boldface questions bother me, what should I do? Those are questions that you should reserve till the end of the webinar. We want to answer those questions, but they're out of context when it comes to the content of this webinar. So yeah, we want to answer them, but those are the kind of questions that you want to reserve for the end of the webinar. Okay, but questions that are about the content that we talk about, definitely put those questions in line. Now on the right hand side, we have this big horizontal part. This entire space is going to be for my questions to you. We want to keep this webinar very interactive. That's the only way we can have fun. So I'll ask a bunch of questions, and you'll have short answer pods, which is what you see over here. You'll have polls over here where you have multiple responses or single response polls, and this is where you would answer my questions. And as long as we follow this, we're going to be able to get through this webinar about a couple of hours or so. So most of you are here to figure out how to get to a high GMAT score. And one of the first things that I want to start with is when it comes to getting a high GMAT score, there's one thing that matters more than everything else out there. That is this word called building ability. And the reason I want to emphasize on this very, very, very heavily is because when people think about acing the GMAT, they worry about, oh, I've got to get answers right in 2 minutes or 90 seconds if it's SC. I've got to worry about how do I sit through a 3 hour, 6 minute long exam. I have to worry about which sections to attempt. And those things are important. I'm not going to say they're not important, but they together, all of this accounts for about 20% of what counts for the outcome. And majority of the people who I know falter because they don't focus over here. So 80% is this piece over here, building ability. And I want to make sure that most of you, take this away from this, that, hey, I've got to first worry about building ability. And then if you build ability, fixing these things, if you have problems, that is over here, is a fairly simple thing. So that's kind of, think about, in other words, this is what takes months. This is what takes days or weeks. That's basically what it is. Okay, two other terms over here. So I'm going to look at a term called accuracy. What is accuracy? It's a term that you guys know. When you take a quiz, let's say it's a 10 question quiz, you get 8 out of 10 questions correct, and you say, okay, my accuracy is 80%. So essentially it's the percentage of questions that you answer correctly. Now, accuracy is an absolute term, which means in a quiz you could have 80% accuracy, but it doesn't tell you how good you are compared to others. Ability is a comparative term. You may have 80% accuracy, but your ability based on that might just be 50 percentile. Why? Because if everyone or half the people who take that quiz get at least 8 questions right, then essentially your ability is 50 percentile. On the GMAT, this is much more relevant, about 5 times as relevant as accuracy is. So that's another takeaway that I want you to have with regards to this. And let's kind of start with this, and which is why we say, hey, GMAT's a test of ability, not a test of accuracy. So what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to simulate how an adaptive test works. And this is a fairly simple simulation. The GMAT's a bit more sophisticated than this, but it follows the exact same principle. So what we have over here is a set of 6 questions that 2 students are attempting. On the y-axis, you have difficulty level. So the higher you go on y-axis, the more difficult a question becomes. On the x-axis, you have the question number. So let's take student 1 or case 1. Student 1 gets the first question. He gets the first question, which is usually of a medium difficulty level, gets that right. Then gets the second question, which is slightly more challenging. And why do we say that? Because you can see we're going higher on the y-axis as you go from question number 1 to question number 2. So he gets that right as well. Then he gets the third question, which is even more challenging. You're going further up on that y-axis. He gets that wrong. Then he gets the fourth question. Because he got the second question right, he got the third question wrong. The fourth question is between that the difficulty level of that is between that difficulty level of second and third. He gets that right. Now, how do we figure it out? Figure out that the difficulty is between that of question 2 and question 3. Draw horizontal lines from here. You're going to really see that's kind of where it is. And again, those lines aren't truly horizontal, but yeah, that's the best I could do. Let's just go back and remove those horizontal lines. He gets that fourth question right, and accordingly gets the fifth question a bit more tougher, gets that wrong. That's student number 1 for you. Let's kind of take student number 2 and going to accelerate the case. Student number 2 gets the first question, median difficulty level, gets that wrong. Gets the second question, which is easier, gets that right. Accordingly, because he got the first wrong, the second one right, the third question is a bit more challenging. He gets that wrong. Gets the fourth question, that is easier, and gets the fifth question, that is easier. That's a bit more challenging as well. Now, this is kind of in principle how a computer adaptive test works. There's a bit more sophistication to it, but let's say this is how the GMAT worked. Now, if I were to end the test at question number 5, then who do you think would be doing better at question number 5? So let's just, if we were to end the test at question number 5, so we will say, hey, this is the no more questions to attempt. Who do you think would be doing better over here? Would it be student 1 or student 2? Let's get a few more responses. I have 23, 25, 32. I have upwards of 60 students in the webinar. I want about at least 40 of you to take a stand and say, who do you think is doing better? Is it student 1 or student 2? Okay, I have about 40 responses right now. 42. Let me end the poll, broadcast the results. As you can see, 80% of you say student 1 is doing better. That's absolutely correct. Another 21% says student 2 is doing better. And that's the fun, when you have different opinions, we can figure out how people think, and we can really give you that feedback over here. So for those of you who say student 1 is doing better, why do you think student 1 is doing better? What's the rationale? Why did you pick student 1? Why do you think student 1, due to the difficult level of questions, probability is better for student 1? Well, both of them got 3 out of 5 questions correct, so their accuracy is identical. He ends up at a higher level, raise the level of questions, yes. Higher difficulty questions solved. Okay. That's all of these are good. For those of you who chose student 2, so that's good. So I think I have enough answers from folks who said student 1's doing better. I want to understand what was your thought process. The people who said student 2, can you please put in your responses? What was your thought process when you chose student 2 is doing better? Answered the last, you actually answered the last two correctly. So, okay, what else? So answered the last couple of questions correctly. Okay. What else? What else was the reason why you picked student 2? There's some people who really say, hey, Rajat's asking this question. This must be a trick question. It can't be so easy. And so, student 1 seems natural, but because student 1 seems natural, I'm going to choose student 2. And again, if you're one of those people, the GMAT's very logical. There's not a whole lot of trick when it comes to how the GMAT operates or the algorithm behind it or so. So again, really important, if you chose student 1 and you said, hey, he answered more difficult questions correctly. So if I were to really give you a few more stats, let's kind of go there. Student 1, got 5 questions. Each one of those questions was either at the average difficulty level. Question number 1 was at the average difficulty level or above the average difficulty level. Student 2 got only the first question at the average difficulty level. Now, both of them had 60% accuracy or 3 out of 5 questions correct. Now, 2 things that you should take away from this simulation. If you want to score higher on the GMAT, there are 2 challenges that you need to overcome. The first challenge is to get difficult questions served to you. Okay, why? Because there's a question picker on the GMAT that's going to serve question, and it's going to decide which question to serve, easy, medium, or hard. So your challenge first is to get those difficult questions served to you, and then the second challenge is, to answer them correctly. And if you think about it, it really truly is one challenge, which is to answer difficult questions correctly, because if you get difficult questions, you don't answer them, you actually get back to medium difficulty or easier question. Okay. And again, when I say your GMAT score is governed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly, this is kind of what it is. And this is essentially the translation of the fact that the GMAT is a test of your ability. Okay. Now this was just pure simulation. Now so again, this is the second takeaway that I want to make sure that you get. First was GMAT's a test of ability. The second is it's governed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. Now, the images on this slide are a bit hazy, so I'm going to kind of detail them out to you. So what you see over here are GMAT prep attempts, and GMAT prep was an official GMAT software that the GMAC provided to us in 2018 or before. And in this software, there were a bunch of data points that it gave us and insights about how the GMAT worked. So what you see is attempt on the verbal section. On the pre-2018 or pre-mid 2018, the verbal section on the GMAT had 41 questions, which this was a longer form of the GMAT when the test was not 3 hours, 6 minutes, but about 4 hours or so. And what you see here is attempt on 41 questions and of 2 different students. Now the red rectangles here, the shaded rectangles, are question numbers that these 2 students got wrong. Now when you look at these 2 students, what you'd find is that, hey, between question numbers 11 and 41, so this is 11, starting 11, and this is 41, there's very little to choose between these 2 students. Both of them made 9 mistakes, and the mistakes are more or less equally spaced. The only difference over here is in question numbers 1 and 2. Okay, this is kind of where the difference comes out. Now, if you were to look at this data through a very simplistic lens, and you'd say, hey, the accuracy difference is 2 questions, and so they should be fairly similar. Okay, but the reality is very different. Student 1 got a V43, which is a 97th percentile on the GMAT. Student 2 got a V32, which is a 65th percentile on the GMAT. And so essentially, when I show people this data, they have certain conclusions that come out of this. And when you look at this data, what do you think about this? Or in other words, do you think the GMAT's harsh? Do you think the GMAT's harsh? Yes, no. Okay, yes, it's brutal. No, it is not. It's all on the first questions. No. How did the two wrong questions make such a big difference? Okay. So we have a split jury, and let's see how much of a split jury we have. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a formal poll, because a formal poll gives us good stats. So the question now is changed. Is the GMAT forgiving? The question says, is the GMAT forgiving? And the answer is yes or no. So if you think the GMAT's harsh, then you say no. If you think the GMAT's forgiving, then you say yes. And again, this is the data that you have. Look at this data, infer from this data, and tell me, what do you think? Is the GMAT forgiving or is it harsh? Again, I'm going to wait for about 40-45 responses here. 3, 2, I have 39 responses. Let's get one more response. Is the GMAT harsh? Come on, pick a side. All right. Let me end the poll. We have 42 responses. And 36% of if you say, no, it's not harsh, it's actually forgiving. And 64% of you say it's harsh. So let's start with people who say the GMAT's forgiving. What's your basis for saying that? Why do you think the GMAT's forgiving? Let me clear this. Why do you think the GMAT's forgiving? And I'm going to ask the same question to people who said, no, it's not. Why do you think it's forgiving? What's your basis for it? You can get a lot of questions wrong and still get a very strong score. Absolutely, yes. Okay. The GMAT, the correct answer is yes, the GMAT's really forgiving if you can prove to the test that you have the ability. Now, the case in point is, let's just look at this guy in isolation. He made 9 mistakes, 25% of the questions. He got 25% of the questions wrong. He was still able to score in the top 3 percentile. What does that tell you? 9 mistakes, almost a quarter of the questions wrong, and still in the top 3 percentile. That just shows the forgiving nature of the test, right? Does it or does it not? Does it? Yes, it shows. I mean, 9 out of 41. Oh, I think that notion of first time, you're going to address that. Just keep it in your pocket for about 10 minutes or so. Okay. Just keep it in your pocket for now. For 10 minutes, I'm going to address that first time notion, which by the way is a really bad notion. So the GMAT's actually a really forgiving test. You can make mistakes on the GMAT as long as you don't make a ton of stupid mistakes, which you shouldn't if you're a 90th percentile student. So let's kind of look at how the test worked and why is it that 2 mistakes cost that second guy a V32 score. So when you think about the GMAT, before I explain this, I want to just put this principle in your head. When you think about the GMAT, think about interviewing someone for a mid-level management position. So think about interviewing someone for a director position, so a director of marketing, or let's say a director of sales. Has anyone hired people over here? Has anyone hired people? Yes, no? Okay, we have a few people who've hired other folks. Now, that's good. Many of you have. That's really good. I mean, that shows that you guys are in that zone where you should be, looking to do your MBA. So let's say you're looking for someone, you're looking to hire someone, and you're looking to hire let's say a director of sales. Now you get a candidate for an interview, and you ask that candidate a question which is appropriate for a director of sales. Okay, and he answers that incorrectly. Just the first question, he answers that incorrectly. What do you think you would really do? What's your opinion of that person? Let me repeat the question. You get a person for a director position, you ask him, you'd give him another chance, that's true. Okay, so you give him another chance, that's because you're there in the interview, you've scheduled that 1 hour, right? So you say, okay, I'm going to ask you an easier question this time, and then you ask that person an easier question, and the person still falters. If you ask a second question, which is an easier question, which is really not a director level, but for a, let's say a senior manager level, and the person gets that wrong again, then what would your opinion of that person be? He's not as capable. He probably is not close to ruled out, yes. And the GMAT works exactly the same way. It's actually a very human test. So the first question that the student 2, who the V32 student got, was a medium difficulty question. He got that wrong. Okay, a medium difficulty question is a question that 70% of the people answer correctly. Okay. Then the next question that he got was a relatively easy question. He got that wrong as well. So at this point, the test is not very wrong to think that this guy is not a super smart guy, because a 90th percentile student will not get, a medium difficulty and then an easy question wrong, one after the other. Am I correct? I mean, isn't that how you all would behave? You get a medium difficulty question, then an easy question wrong. So the next question that this guy gets is what we call as an easy question, a 15th percentile question. He answers this correctly. So the test slowly increases the difficulty level. He answers the 4th question correctly, 5th question correctly, 6th question correctly. And by the time this guy reaches 8th or 9th question, he gets to 700 level questions. Now, student 1 or case 1 gets the first question right, okay, which is a medium difficulty, gets a medium hard question, gets another medium hard question, gets a hard question, gets more hard questions, continues to answer them correctly. So essentially, what you see over here is that student 1 got a ton of hard questions and he continued to answer them correctly. Student 2 actually answered a few hard questions correctly, but started making mistakes on hard questions, because the moment he got hard questions, at the time he reached question number 8, 9, 10, and then he started making mistakes again. All right. So that's kind of the lesson. So the lesson that I want to give you is on the GMAT. The GMAT's a very human test. It's not, a lot of people think that it's a black box. I've got to get everything right. The first 10 questions are very important in this case. And so I can't get them wrong or so. I want to make sure you understand the GMAT's a very human test. And if you prepared well for the GMAT, you're going to do well. If you're not prepared well, the GMAT's going to figure that out for you. Both these students were e-GMAT students. This was a GMAT prep attempt, but this guy on his actual GMAT got a V44. This guy on his actual GMAT got a V35. So if you think about what the GMAT prep test did, it actually estimated their abilities very, very accurately. Okay. And the GMAT is going to figure that out, by the way. If you're not a 90th percentile student, the test is designed to be able to figure out what your true ability is. Or in other words, you don't win or lose the test in the test. You win or lose the test during your preparation. That's what matters. Yes, as I said earlier, this is as per the old exam structure, which is why we were able to get this data. You no longer get that data now. In the old exam structure, you would get that data. The current algorithm still follows the same structure. It's just that the GMAT wanted to compete with the GRE, and hence they shortened the test. But the algo still is the same. So in a way, you can't cheat the test. No, there's no way to cheat the test. I mean, anyone who really tells you that, hey, I'm going to give you the key to acing the test by doing this, spending more time here and doing less things over there, doesn't know how the test works. No. Okay. So now you guys were looking at these students and you said, hey, 9 mistakes versus 11 mistakes. The GMAT doesn't care about it. Okay. What the GMAT cares about are their individual ability scores. Again, go back to that hiring example, right? Let's look at you are hiring that guy for the director of sales, and you actually throw appropriate questions at that student and at that candidate, and the candidate does really well. Then you throw really hard questions that, you know, a vice president level or an EVP level candidate would be expected to answer. Now, if that person falters on really hard questions, would you hold that negatively against that person? If you throw really hard questions that, no, you won't hold that negatively. That's the same with the GMAT works. You can make mistakes as long as you make mistakes on hard questions. Now, what the GMAT measures internally for these students are their ability scores. So for the 97 percentile guy, that 97, that V43 score was an outcome of the fact that this person's ability in SC was 95th percentile, in CR was 95th percentile, and in RC was 87th percentile. Whereas the V32 student had very different abilities. Now, when you look at these two students through the lens of ability, can you really see that they're very different entities? Or in other words, is the difference more profound when you look at them through the lens of ability? Yes, no, right? And that's what the GMAT does. It cares about your ability scores. And there are individual ability scores that are assigned to these subsections. Akshay says, does each question have a weight associated? Yes. Each question does have a weight associated with it, depending on the difficulty level. And so if, for example, an easy question has 1/3 the weight of a hard question. Okay. Now, has anyone seen an ESR, or what's called an enhanced score report here? So when you take the GMAT, and if you take the in-center GMAT, you post that, you can spend $30 to get an ESR or an enhanced score report. That ESR gives you these ability scores. So say if you get a V32, it'll tell you what is your ability score in SC, CR, and RC. If you get a Q46, it'll tell you what is your ability score in arithmetic and algebra geometry. So it's not something that I'm making up. It's something that the test measures internally. And that's how it comes up with a verbal score. That's how it comes up with a quant score, and then your eventual GMAT score. Or in other words, these ability scores are the cause. Your end GMAT score is the effect. You address the cause, you get the effect. Okay. Again, the same thing. Your GMAT score is governed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. So then, if you think about this, you may ask, okay, what abilities is this score composed of? As I talked about, you have 2 ability scores in quant, algebra, geometry, and on arithmetic, and then 3 ability scores on verbal. Now, there are a few things that you should know about this. Each subsection is independent. What it means is how you do in SC has no bearing on the difficulty level of questions served to you in CR. Or similarly, how you do in arithmetic has absolutely no impact on the difficulty level of the questions that you get in algebra geometry. In other words, you might score a 0 percentile in SC, you can get a 99 percentile or a 97 percentile, which is the highest percentile you can get in CR. Okay, if you're really good in one versus the other. The second thing is each subsection has equal weight. Some people really say, hey, RC has a greater weight than CR because you get more questions served. No, that's not how it works. It's just that when it comes to RC, the GMAT needs to serve you more questions to get a reliable estimate of your ability. When it comes to CR, it doesn't need to serve you as many questions. That's why the question distribution is that way. But when it comes to the impact on the end score, each subsection is weighed equally. The third thing which is there are multiple combinations of ability scores that can lead to a certain verbal or a certain quant score. Or in other words, if you think about a V38, there are about 20 ways to get to a V38. You've got to figure out which is the right way for you to get to a V38. Or in other words, you need a target ability for each subsection based on what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. All right, so far so good. This is a lot of information to take in, but are you following along? Okay. The next piece, which is really important, is the process of building ability. And I use the word building ability because we truly build ability when we ace the GMAT. We don't learn tricks, we build ability. That process of going from 20th percentile to 90th percentile in SC or going from 20th percentile to 90th percentile in number properties or arithmetic is identical. That process doesn't change. So in other words, if you're at 20th percentile in number properties versus the 20th percentile in 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 geometry versus the 20th percentile in SC, you'd go through the same process or same kind of steps in this. Of course, in SC you'll be studying SC, in CR you'll be studying CR, but how you would be studying for the first 5-7 days and then for the next 3 to 4 days is going to be more or less identical. Okay. And the last piece is each one of you has certain strengths because of your background. And so your starting points or starting abilities in each of these subsections is likely going to be different. I mean, if you're an e-GMATer, you build your personalized study plan. Your personalized study plan is built on those starting abilities in these subsections. And I can tell you, e-GMATers build about 10,000 personalized study plans every year. Okay. So the next piece that you have to really have on your wall is, hey, when you think about that GMAT score, a lot of people focus on that 750 or that 730 or that 760, but what they don't really do is to really say, okay, what ability scores are going to get me to that 750 or 760? And you should have these numbers on the wall to really say, I'm aiming for that 95th percentile ability in SC, or I'm only going for 60th percentile ability in arithmetic or so. And that's very important because if you're going to hit 760, which is 99 percentile, you should precisely know what ability scores you're aiming for so that you can channelize your energy in that direction. Or in other words, acing the GMAT or getting a 740 is not about excelling in everything. No, it's about excelling in areas that are strong, that are your strong suit, and then doing well, not excelling, but doing well in other areas. And that determination, the earlier you make it, the better it is, the more efficient your prep is, the more likely your chance to hit that 740 score is. Okay, how many people, or what's the ratio of folks who actually aim for a 740 versus who actually get a 740 or higher? What do you think is the ratio? Of people who aim for a 740 versus who get a 740? It's about 1:10, I would say. 1:10, 1.5:10 or so. And one of the main reasons why people don't get there or why people get stuck at a 650, 660 is one of the reasons. There are many, but is they don't know their ability scores. So let's look at this question. This is a very appropriate question. When I started my preparation, I was asked to enter my target starting score, but I didn't know, as I'd never given the GMAT, how do I go about doing that? Take a Sigma X mock. I mean, we give you your ability scores in the Sigma X mock. And if you haven't done it, please take it so that you have those ability scores over there. And for those of you who don't know your starting abilities, the only way to get your starting abilities is either you take an official test and in center and then get an ESR, which is $280, or you take a Sigma X mock. We offer one free Sigma X mock, and then you get your starting abilities. Okay. So yeah, definitely. I mean, that's one of those things that come in the instructions to you. If you don't know your starting abilities because you're not a retaker, take a Sigma X mock, get those starting abilities there. Okay. So again, acing the GMAT, I'm going to just clear everything, is about building that ability. Okay. Now, we saw the principle on which the GMAT works. We saw a GMAT prep attempt. Now I'm going to show you an actual GMAT attempt of a student who improved from a V17 to a V40. V17 is like 15th percentile, V40 is 91st percentile in this case. And what's interesting over here is this is another example to show you that you can make mistakes on the test. It's just about where you make mistakes or on what kind of questions you make mistakes. So again, you can download his ESR, and this is a very unique student. Why? Because I think with regards to making mistakes, the mistakes come out really well here. I think this is over here in customer success stories. Yeah, he is number 5, Axel, and you can, where it says download ESR. If you click on it, you can go and download the ESR for yourself. Again, this is the old attempt on the GMAT. What you see over here is what we call as a typical build, maintain strategy. So for most of you in the first block, you're going to get, medium to medium hard questions. And if you truly have that 90th percentile ability, you would actually get most of them right. Now, he did not consciously get most of them right. He got most of them right because he had that high ability. Okay. So this 88% accuracy was a conscious decision, or it was a conscious outcome of the fact that during his preparation, he built that ability. Similarly, this was a conscious outcome of the fact that, hey, the questions became more hard over here, so he's going to make more mistakes. But again, because he had high ability, he still got a majority of them right. In blocks 3 and blocks 4, the questions became super hard. So he made more mistakes. But because he made mistakes on hard questions, he still was able to get to a V40 over here. And which I think is a key takeaway. When I said the GMAT's a test of ability, this is how ability shows up or leads to essentially excellent outcomes. Okay. So another takeaway that I want you to have is, you can make mistakes and still get a high score as long as you make mistakes on hard questions. Now, some of you really say, how do I know if a question's hard? How many of you are thinking that way? How do I know if a question is hard? Because here, Rajat, you're saying make mistakes on hard questions. My question to you is, do you consciously want to make mistakes on any question? No. So it doesn't matter. Bottom line is, and that's what I said, you win or lose the GMAT battle during your preparation, not during the test. The test is just a reflection of the quality of preparation that you've done. Okay. So which this question also translates to a few questions. Do the first 10 questions matter? Should you approach them differently? And should you spend more time on the first 10? Okay. So basically you need to give your best every time? No. Actually, you need to make sure that you just take the actual attempt as you take a GMAT mock. Okay. But let's kind of look at this. So this is 1, 2, and 3. The way I want you to answer these 3 questions is, if you want to say yes, 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 I want you to write y, comma, y, comma, y. If you want to say yes, no, no, y, and n. So just type the 3 letters. Sorry, why did I hide the poll? Let me bring the poll back. Here's my short answer pod here. So I want you to tell me y and n, y and y, or whatever your response is. Put your answers there. N. Yes, good. I like. Yes, depends. Yes, that's good too. I had not talked about the depends piece. And again, on the right, not in the Q&A pod. Let's get a few more responses here. Good. So yn, yy, nyn. Okay, yes, yes, no. So I'll tell you what I will say. Do the first 10 matter? Yes, they do. Should you approach them differently? No, you shouldn't. Should you spend more time? That actually would be a catastrophe. So no. Okay. Really important. I'll give you really straight answers to this, but these are my answers. And I'm going to show you stats to make you believe why should you believe these answers. Okay. Now, again, the principles is the same. You can make mistakes, and I'm going to explain these answers, so bear with me for about 5 minutes. Remember this, as long as you make mistakes on hard questions, you're fine. Now, I want to tell you the composition of a 90th percentile student. And let's say, this is Melissa over here, and you're that 90th percentile student. So if Melissa truly in her preparation, remember, you do not become a 90th percentile student on the test. You're a 90th percentile student in your preparation. The test is just a validity of who you are. All right. if you are a 60th percentile student, the test will not let you become a 90th percentile student. Okay, it'll tell that you're a 60th percentile student. It's very similar to how you prepare for a race. Your 0 to, if you do a 100-meter sprint, your 100-meter sprint times will be within 5% of what you've been doing in practice. So you win or you achieve a certain time during your preparation, not during the actual race. The variation in the actual race is very little. So similarly, do you agree with me? You can't be a slow guy and suddenly go to a 100-meter sprint and say, hey, I'm going to actually beat my time by 50%. No, that doesn't work. I mean, we as humans, thank God it doesn't work. Otherwise, life would be very uncertain, right? The same thing happens on the GMAT. Okay, so you're a 90th percentile guy from your preparation, not from the actual test. All right, and those people who come in and really say, hey, I was scoring 700, and many of you have seen these horror stories or read them on GMAT Club. I was scoring 700, 740 on mocks, and I ended up with a 620 on the actual test. How many of you have read those? How many of you have read those horror stories? Yes. I can tell you, on the GMAT, people who prepare well, 90 to 95% of them actually score within their ability range. Okay, the GMAT's a very predictable test, and we see this internally because we collect upwards of 500 data points on you, and we can predict your score within 20 points. In fact, there are people who actually write to me and they really say, hey, Rajat, I'm your student. I got really good scores on a bunch of mocks, and I took the test and I screwed up. The only mocks I didn't get good scores were a Sigma X mock, and I look at them and I look at their ability scores within Scholaranium and their actual scores and their ability scores match up. And if you're too new, then that's good for you, because if when you hear those horror stories, don't think that the GMAT is a difficult test. Okay, is the audio good, clear now? All right. So what I want to say is the GMAT's a very predictable test. When you hear those horror stories, do not believe those. Within the e-GMAT platform, we track upwards of 500 data points, and I can tell you, for 95% of the students, we can predict your scores within 20 points. We can tell you if you're going to get a 650. We can tell you if you're going to get a 740. Okay. So that's how reliable this is. So you're going to see those horror stories, because when people don't do well, they go and they actually post about it. What you don't see is when people do well. And 95% of the people do well. So let's kind of come back to this and say, if you truly are a 90th percentile student, these are your stats. For medium difficulty questions, your accuracy is going to be 90%, which means your probability that you're going to get a medium difficulty question wrong is 10%. Similarly, your probability that you're going to get a medium hard question wrong is about 20%. Your probability that you're going to get a hard question wrong is 1 in 3, more or less. This is who you are if you're a 90th percentile student. Now, in the first 10 questions, if you make a mistake, if you get medium questions, do you think you're going to make a mistake given this? No, you're not going to make a lot of mistakes. If you get medium difficulty questions, your probability of making a mistake is 1 in 10. Okay. Now, what happens when you're conscious? Test anxiety. How can a 90th percentile student have test anxiety? I mean, do you really see, Ronaldo missing a penalty on an empty goal? Do you see that happen? No, he won't be Ronaldo. And that's a classical sign of a guy who's not a 90th percentile student. And that's really important to know. Okay. Now, here is what happens. Who was the goalkeeper? Was was that an empty goal? Not with a good goalkeeper. That's not what I said. Again, right? So again, I'm not talking about with a good goalkeeper. Good goalkeeper is like a hard question. It's a worthy enemy, right? Or a worthy opposition. I shouldn't use the word enemy because the hard question is truly your friend. But coming back to this, what I'm trying to tell you is, if in the first 10 questions you get a medium question, you're going to get it right in the normal way. Now, what happens when you give things special treatment? You say, I'm going to definitely get this right. I'm going to revise how I went through this question. Okay, what happens then? You become conscious. You go revise how you went through things. That's when those tempting answer choices start to become more tempting. And even though you may have marked this question correctly in the normal course of things, you end up choosing the wrong answer choice. Has that happened with anyone? You mark the correct one, you're very confident, and say, let me just look at it once again, go back, and then you mark the incorrect one because you say, maybe this is a trick question, maybe this is what the question is asking. And when you give anything special treatment, that's when you mess up that 90% stat, which, by the way, is your capability. That's when you get caught on a full toss. That's when you miss that penalty on an empty goal. So do not give any question any special treatment. If you've been scoring well on your mocks, you're going to do well on the actual GMAT. Especially if you didn't know the questions on the mocks. And which is where, when someone really says, hey, I'm aiming for that 750, I got this in this mock, we look at our Scholarinium stats, we look at our mock stats. Basically, the GMAT expects you to be yourselves. Yes. Yes. That's what it is. If you've not built ability till that point, till the actual test, you're not going to build ability during the test. And that's the whole principle. Remember the hiring example. If someone messed up on 3 appropriate questions, appropriate difficulty questions, they're not suddenly going to become Superman and answer super hard questions correctly. Humans don't operate that way. And thank God for that. Right? There is no human tonic that's been invented to this day that's going to make you a Superman. And training makes all the difference. Yes. And then even people who actually score 780, they make mistakes. Okay. She's one of our students, Magdalena. She scored a Q50, V47. Her ESR showed mistakes. V48 actually. This guy got a 760 scorer with a V47. He made mistakes. It's just that those mistakes were not on medium questions. They were on hard questions. Okay. And you can watch their interviews. You can really see their Scholarinium stats and you can see how many mistakes they make. So bottom line is focus on building ability. Don't do anything special on the actual test. And you would do just fine if you've prepared properly. If you've not prepared properly, then anyhow, there are no miracles on the test. Okay, question. Spend time on all sections on verbal or spend based on ability? You will get the answer to that in another 15-20 minutes or so. So hold that question as well. Okay. So we have these 5 bullet points. Let's kind of go to, we did this. Let's talk about this part over here, that you need a target ability in each subsection. And for you, that ability has to be personalized to you. Okay. And this is where building that personalized study plan is really important. Okay. So why don't you write down over here, in your opinion, what does a study plan do? What does a study plan do? Doesn't make you deviate, gives a roadmap of sorts. Attack weak areas, help focus on appropriate sections, gives you a roadmap, okay. Stamina, all right. All right. So let's get this. And I'm going to tell you what the study plan does. What questions does it answer? I'm going to talk about those. Okay. All right. So let me tell you what a study plan at e-GMAT is supposed to do. Okay. The first thing it's supposed to do is it's supposed to give you clarity as to how you, with your personal strengths and weaknesses, would reach your target GMAT score. So you should have a vision of, okay, this is where I'm going to invest my time, and this is the ability scores that I'm aiming for. The second thing is it gives you a clear idea of how much time you need to put in to reach that target GMAT score. Which and you know, someone says, hey, I have 1 month, I have 20 days, I'm just starting my preparation. Some people say I want to take the GMAT in 8 months or so, and for me, all of those are very vague statements because I don't have your starting abilities, I don't have your target scores, I don't have your time commitment per day. Um, at e-GMAT, acing the GMAT is about the math of how many hours we think you need versus how many hours you're willing to put in, and the quality of that effort. And so there are people who say I have 8 months before the GMAT, and if we believe that they need just 3 months, we really say, hey, don't worry about preparing for the GMAT now. Come to us 4 months before your test, because you're not going to do a great job if you know you have way more time. Middle of your study, you're going to go towards and watch a YouTube video because your mind will tell you, anyhow, you're not taking the GMAT right away. Does that happen? You're studying and in the middle of your prep, you say, let me spend 5 minutes on YouTube. Yes, you don't want that. Uh, well, if you're preparing for the GMAT. So acing the GMAT's a lot about focusing your brain than about, hey man, I've got to learn this trick or that trick. So and then the next piece is, where do you put in this time? How much effort am I going to put in SCCR? Where in SC am I going to start practicing questions, or am I going to focus on learning what aspect? These are good questions that a study plan should answer on the first day of your preparation, on the first day. Really, really important. All of this needs to be done on the first day, and it should lead to a chart that you should paste on your walls because it should remind you of everything every day. So let's see how we go about doing this. And to do this, I mean, the best way to do this is to illustrate this with examples. I'm going to take examples of two students. Both of them are our students. Both of them did really well on the GMAT, but both of them are very different students. So Ayush, who went to Columbia, and Rafaela, who went to Harvard. And Ayush had a starting score of 670. He came to us after having taken the GMAT 3 times and was frustrated because Columbia and Ross would not let him in because he didn't have a high enough GMAT score. They said, all you need is a GMAT score because we love you in your interview. We'd already applied to these schools and they had waitlisted him. Rafaela came to us before her first attempt, and that 600 score was from a Sigma X mock. Okay. So let's kind of look at this, and this is something we do within e-GMAT. We actually build your study plan in 3 easy steps, and you kind of get a chart like this, and then a bunch of other things. So Rafaela improved from her starting score of 600 over here, and let's see if I can change that color. Starting score of 600, where she had a really good verbal score and a really low quant score, to a 730. You can see the improvement in both quant and verbal. So let's see how Rafaela went about doing this. As I said, she had not taken the test before. So the first thing she did was she took a Sigma X mock. When she took the Sigma X mock, she got her ability scores. These were her starting ability scores. What do you observe from here? What do you observe from these ability scores? Let's put in those observations. Guys, yeah, weak in quant, good on SC and CR. RC is weak. Yes, really good in SC and CR. I mean, super high ability scores here. RC is an area, but a lot of effort needed in quant. Arithmetics, especially weak. Better in algebra geometry than arithmetic. Okay. So then she put this data into our PSP or our study planner tool, and she got target abilities. And you see over here, this maintains her starting abilities in SC and CR, ups her RC abilities. But then also it takes into account the fact that her starting ability in algebra geometry is better. So it ups that, but it doesn't up the arithmetic ability to that level. And the key thing is to really say, okay, what's the best way to get to a 730? And this, or what we call as the most likely way and the shortest path. And to get to an 83rd percentile in algebra geometry is a lot easier for someone who's at a 50th percentile than for someone who's at a 15th percentile in arithmetic to really get to an 80th percentile over there. So then the PSP generated a personalized study plan for her, and you can really see not a whole lot of effort in SC and CR, just about 2 days of dedicated effort, but about 2.5 weeks of dedicated effort in RC, 2 weeks of dedicated effort in arithmetic, and 2 weeks of dedicated effort in algebra. This is what it was. Overall, we're looking at about, close to 2 months. Actually, I think she took about 50 days to take her, in which she took the test. Very diligent student overall. So, but that's not it. It's not just about the time spent. You have to figure out where you need to spend this time. And that's where it's really important to know how we as humans learn. Now, I want to introduce to you the process of building ability. Remember, I said the process of building ability remains the same regardless of where you get started. So we call this the 3 stages of learning. The first stage is where you learn concepts and applications. So let's say in SC, you need to learn, all the basic concepts that are tested, and you need to learn how to apply them. And that's, in my opinion, the foundation stage. So think of, building a wall. If you're building a strong wall, what's the first thing you have to do if you want to build a strong wall? Okay, you have to have a foundation. What else? You first lay the foundation, then what else do? You line up the bricks on that wall, right? After that foundation, you line up all the bricks on that wall. So learning concepts and application is building that foundation first and then lining up the bricks on that wall. Mastering application, once you have the bricks lined up, they're lined up perfectly, what's the next thing you need to do? Cementing, yes. If you're an e-GMAT student, you know cementing already. So when we call it cementing within the e-GMAT platform too. So you master application, you cement these, and the next thing, once you've done cementing, you have to take any blemishes out. So that's where you refine to perfection. And when you think about this, there's no rocket science in this. This is very similar to how you perfect anything in life. This is not limited just to the GMAT. If you want to learn how to code, you go about it this way. If you want to learn how to do pottery, you go about it this way as well. Okay. Does this make sense? Does this make sense? Yes? Yeah. But very few of you think about the GMAT this way. And knowing this is really important. Why? Because each one of these stages leads to a certain ability score. So when you learn concepts and applications, you can get up to a 55th to 60th percentile ability. Once you cement, you can get to a 75th to a 80th percentile ability. And then you refine to perfection, you can get to that 95th, 99th percentile ability or so. Okay. So these are ability thresholds. Also, what it means is, if you are at a 90th percentile ability, you're already in this stage. There's no point learning a whole lot of concepts over here. If you are at a 40th percentile, you've got to start at this stage. There is no point practicing questions. Or in other words, doing a wrong activity leads to a ton of wastage of resources and wastage of time. Very similar to if the bricks aren't aligned properly and you start adding cement, you'll have to go break that wall again and align those bricks up again. It works exactly the same way. So with Rafaela, she had these starting abilities. She had these target abilities over here. Okay. And so she had to figure out what to start studying with. And this is a legend I want to make sure you understand. When you see, and let me go in to change the color over here. This is the legend where you say, hey, this is something that Rafaela already knows. She need not study. This is what she needs to study. And this is what she's not aiming for, so it's not required. And on the next slide, you would see a chart. This is a chart that you should have for your preparation. Okay. So in RC, she had to start from basics. So as well as in arithmetic and algebra, she had to do cementing over here. But because she wasn't aiming for a super high ability, she did not have to do refined to perfection for arithmetic. Remember, she was only aiming for that 55th percentile, not that 90th percentile or so. Okay. In SC and CR, she was already over here. All she had to do was maintain that ability. When you look at those numbers, does this chart make sense? Do you guys do this on the first day of your preparation? You should do that. You need to have that level of insight. I'm going to share the PDF with you. You can use that. What is this chart? Can anyone explain what is this chart? This chart, yeah, not KPI, not key process. This chart is the set of activities that you should engage in. Okay. And in RC, Rafaela needed to start from learning the basics, but in SC and CR, she already knew the basics. So she could skip the e-GMAT SC and CR courses. She could skip the cementing process. All she had to do was maintain over here. So, which is why, if you look at the time required, in this case, is hardly any time put in place. Okay. On the other hand, in RC and arithmetic and algebra, she had to go through the entire pieces. Okay. Now, a lot of you say, okay, what happens in refined to perfection? This is where your scholarly stats define how to refine to perfection. Very similar to, think about that wall. You know, after cementing, it still has some blemishes. Those blemishes are dependent on the person who actually did the cementing. So very similarly, Scholarinium figures out what those blemishes are in your preparation. And that's where the refinement or the last mile push plan is. A lot of people write to us and really say, hey, I need mentorship from e-GMAT, but I'm at a 500 or a 550. And we kind of tell them, hey, LMP only exists at this point over here. Why? Because this is where the blemishes come in. Beyond that, the platform's the best friend for you. Okay. Arbaz says, my concept quizzes are good, my practice quiz scores are comparative low. Any suggestion? Yes, Arbaz, start following the methods. That's clear data that shows you're not applying the meaning-based approach. You're not doing pre-thinking. Focus on the application files. Okay. So this was Rafaela. Now let's kind of look at Ayush, and what you're going to see is Ayush's scores are very different now. Ayush, as I said, came to us with an official score. He already had an ESR. I think he also took a Sigmax mock just to confirm that, but it primarily was just a confirmation of his ESR. So Ayush essentially had low ability scores despite attempting the GMAT 3 times when he came to us. And in SC and CR, you guys can see that, you know, really low scores here. Why is my color not great? Really low scores here, good score in RC, really great scores in quant. Okay. Accordingly, you know, PSP, not surprisingly, said, hey Ayush, you've got to focus your time on SC and CR because that's where you need help, but you also need to improve on your RC. So the PSP created time for, you know, this chart for him. Again, you can see not a whole lot of time in quant, but 1.1 weeks still in RC. Why? Because it wanted to maximize his advantage in RC. And you can see the amount of effort that's spent in CR and SC over here. About 3 weeks in SC, about 2 dedicated weeks in CR, about 8 dedicated days in RC. And this is really important. To have that dedication is really important. Otherwise, you don't hit these ability scores that are over here. Okay. Then let's talk about the learning path. Again, the 3 stages of learning. If your ability scores are below 55th percentile, you have to start with stage number 1. You've got to brick that, you know, build that solid foundation, lay those bricks in properly. If, on the other hand, you are in that 60th to 65th percentile, that's where you need to master application. Okay. So PSP generated that's personalized study plan for him. Again, the same legend here. So for Ayush, he needed to spend a majority of his time over here and some of his time here in RC. Okay. But in quant, not a whole lot of time and refined to perfection. Also, he's already at an 83rd percentile or so. So let's look at how Ayush and Rafaela were, despite aiming for very similar scores, were studying very, very different things. Okay. For Ayush, he had to spend about 3 weeks in SC. Rafaela only had to spend, a couple of days in SC. Similarly in CR. But when it came to RC, arithmetic and algebra, it was just the other way. Ayush had to spend about 8 days. Rafaela had to spend about 2.5 weeks. Similarly in quant, you can see that as well, and you can see good times. Essentially, a good reasoning behind that time in this case. All right, how do you estimate time? Great question. The time estimates are dependent on two things. One is, given a starting ability, how long does it take for a person to achieve target ability? Okay. For Rafaela, she's already at a 90th percentile ability. So 1 day, you've got to really, 1 day means about 4 hours of effort. Look at the few areas that you're weak in. That's it. Why do you want to spoil something that's bad, right? I don't want you to go through an e-GMAT course just because you've bought an e-GMAT course. My goal is to help you succeed. And if your time's better spent on other activities, then it's my job to direct you towards other activities. So how do you estimate time? This time is dependent on A, how long does someone need to go from point A to point B? And we have data because you have tens of thousands of students. And B, how much effort you're willing to put in on a weekday and on a weekend. You actually input all of that data in PSP when it generates those time estimates. Okay. So the starting points are very different. In case of arithmetic, Rafaela had to start from very basic, same thing in algebra, same thing in RC. Ayush, on the other hand, purely had to go to Scholaranium and take hard quizzes. That's all that he had to do. In RC, Ayush had to start from cementing and then go to refine to perfection. In CR and SC, Rafaela had to do exactly what Ayush had to do in quant, but Ayush in SC had to start from basics, and in CR he had to master application. Now, all of this determinism on first day, this is what you need if you want to have a clear idea of how you're going to get to that 750 score. If you want to get there in a very short amount of time, or I won't call it a very short because it might be 3 months if you're at starting from a very low score, but in the shortest amount of time possible for you. Does that make logical sense? This clarity? And you can see the kind of rigor that goes into building something which is as mundane as a study plan. And you've got to put in that rigor early on. The earlier you put that rigor in, the better, the higher your chances of success would be. Okay. And this is really important. Why? Because a 730 or higher score can have a huge impact. A lot of people really say, hey, can have a good profile, your GMAT score doesn't matter. No, not really. We actually did a bunch of research. So we've been GMAT Club's most successful company for a very long time now. And when you have so much success, you also have a lot of data. And so last year, what we did was we looked at our students who are a bunch of our students. We actually reached out about 500 students. And we asked them, which schools did you apply to? Where did you get an admit from? And so these were 500 students across the spectrum from a 690 score to a 760 or higher score. And here I'm comparing two score ranges. One is a 700 to 730 and a 740 or higher score. And we had almost an equal number of students in these. So in the 700 or 730 range, people who applied to M7 schools, only 13% of them got in. Okay. Now, people who had a 740 or higher, not everyone got in, only 28% got in. but it shows up, about a 2x improvement in admit rate. There were about 80 students or 80 to 85 students in each group. So there's a significant number of students over here. The interesting thing was that 60% of all M7 admits that we had that score in this range. Okay, M7 are called Magnificent Seven, or one of the top B schools in the world. And if you ask that question in the Q&A part, I'm going to send you a link. So you've Columbia, you've Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, GSP, Booth, Kellogg. There's one other school which I'm missing. So there's 7 schools. Yes. Sloan. Yes, Sloan. I was missing Sloan. Thank you for the person who put that answer in. So these are called the Magnificent Seven, some of the hardest schools to get in. Okay. Now, not just the admit, 750 scorers also got a ton more scholarships. So if you go on our platform, there's an admits and scholarships portal. There are about 100 case studies over there where you can watch. These are unedited YouTube interviews that you can watch, and you can toggle the admit rates for this. So one of the things which is really important is that at T20 or top 20 schools, 80% of 740 or higher scorers got some form of financial aid. Okay, that's really important over there. 45% of M7 admits got some form of scholarships. 82% of T20 admits got some form of scholarships, or a combined 62% of people got some form of scholarships. And this is data, hard data that you guys have. No one will give you that data because no one has these many students who are successful. The other thing is 740 versus the 760. The guy who actually, the killer thing is the person who did that research had an opportunity to get a 760. He had a 740 2 years before he applied. He did not. And when he got this data out, he kicked himself and said, man, I should have aimed for those 20 points. So 740 over a 750 leads to a lot more scholarship. And in this case, about 45K more scholarship. Or 35K, yeah, 35K more scholarship, which is really good. What's the typical profile demographics for these students other than the GMAT? It's all across. There's an article that you can read where we talk about international admissions are stacked against international applicants. If you Google that, and with e-GMAT as the term, you're going to see the profiles of students over here. Is this a full scholarship? No, 90K is not a full scholarship. Full scholarship is about right now it's about 140 to 145K or so. So, but this is again the average. Many of these people had full scholarships. Not to say these people did not have a full scholarship, but way more people in this group had a full ride. Okay. Bottom line is a 720 or 730 or higher score can make or break your score. Again, think about it this way, right? If you have a smart guy, you have smart kids in every score range, and a B school is likely to take a 760 scorer or a 730 scorer if all other things match up. Okay. And the reason why we are able to do this is because we report the most 700 plus scores. So this is data from 1st of January 2021 to 31st of August 2021, and you can see the number of 700 plus scores reported on GMAT Club's review portal. In other words, we've actually, and a lot of people say, e-GMAT has more students. Yes, if you compare us with any other company, we probably do have more students than Crack Verbal or GMAT West, but TTP has almost a similar number of students. If you combine all of them, Magoosh actually has a very similar number of students as we do. If you combine all of them, they have about 3 times as many students as we do, yet all of them combined haven't reported this. And the reason is because we approach the GMAT very differently. A lot of people know us for quant. What they don't know is, or for verbal, what they don't know is, since the launch of Quant 2.0, our students have reported more Q49 or higher scores than have students from any other prep company. Again, even if you give TTP and Magoosh, a bit of slack because their students don't have as high starting scores in quant as our students do. These guys have the same demographics as we do. Again, you don't see those high quant scores here. And you can see this all on our YouTube channel where we have upwards of 210 success stories. Most other channels um, have fewer than 20 odd success stories out there. Okay. So with that, what have we learned so far? One is you need that high score. Second is when it comes to acing the GMAT, build ability. To build ability efficiently, get a personalized study plan. And as you execute that personalized study plan, please be aware of these stages of learning. Make sure you start studying at the right stage. Okay. Again, how does your ability improve? This is a different chart to show exactly the same piece. When you learn concepts, you get to about 25th percentile. You learn application, you get to about 50th percentile. You master application or you cement, that's where you get to about 70th percentile. And you refine to perfection, you get to that 90th percentile or so. Okay. So how many of you who are over here have put in a bunch of effort and are still stuck at that 60th percentile? How many of you are still stuck at that 60th percentile? Okay. So then you're not stuck. You are at it, but you're not stuck if you're starting. So So I want to tell you the difference between someone who's stuck at that 60th percentile and someone who actually improves to the 90th percentile is not so much, a lot of people think this person's smart, I'm not as smart. It's not caliber, it's A, studying things with the right attitude, and B, it's diligence. So I'm going to compare two students, a 60th percentile and a 90th percentile student. Both of them, 60th percentile means you're about 80,000 students who are ahead of you. 60th percentile in the context of SC, we're only going to focus on SC, which is where you see over here, spends about 40 hours doing SC, has a starting ability of 30th percentile, and a capability to improve is very similar. A 90th percentile student, again, is among the top 20,000 students who take the GMAT, spends the same 40 hours improving to that 90th percentile, has a very similar starting ability or so. Okay. The reason why a 90th percentile student attains that 90th percentile is the attitude that person has with regards to GMAT's intense correction. Okay. A 60th percentile student, and some of you will associate with this guy, says, hey, GMAT SC is about learning 8 error types. I've got to learn all the concepts, and then I've got to solve questions. And in solving questions, I'm going to use splits as the primary method. Only if I can't get splits, I'm going to use meaning. They spend a bunch, they go through the concepts really quickly. It's because they want to spend a bunch of time practicing questions. So overall, they spend about 30% of their time learning. Again, this is the same 40 hours that we're talking about, and 70% of their time practicing. And while learning, they're at about 7 to 10 feedback points. People who said they're stuck at 60th percentile, do you kind of associate with this? Is this something that sounds like you? And that's kind of where you are. What's the feedback point? How well have you learned verb-ing modifiers? That's a feedback point. How well can you do comparisons where you have clauses versus just words? That's a feedback point. What are splits? Splits are when you look at answer choices, you do a vertical scan and you really say, okay, this is the difference in answer choice. So these are the splits. And it's very, very interesting. I was actually listening to a webinar a couple of days back where a GMAT expert was saying, hey, in SC, it's very easy. It's very difficult to recognize sentences, errors in the original sentence, but you get 4 answer choices. So you can see those splits and figure out this is where the error is going to be. In my opinion, absolutely the wrong way of doing it. A 90th percentile student actually approaches SC in a very different way. For a 90th percentile student, it is about learning those errors, yes, but it's about mapping those errors across 200 different sentence structures. Why? Because for him or her, the GMAT SC is a test of sentence structures. And those sentence structures do test errors which are related to SV modifiers or pronouns or comparisons, but it's about a test of sentence structures. For a 90th percentile student, meaning is not an error type. It's the way to solve questions. A 90th percentile student gets a ton of feedback while learning, about 10 times as much, and accordingly spends a majority of his time learning things properly, and as a result needs way fewer practice questions to achieve that 90th percentile. When you compare these two students, do you really see a huge difference in how they approach things? Do you see a huge difference? And it's that difference that leads to the difference in outcomes. 90th is learning more than practice. It's learning properly, yes. How do you increase feedback points? Use technology. Where can you find 200 major sentence structures? In the e-GMAT SC course. You'd also find that in the official guide, by the way, because that's kind of the source of all of this, but you won't be able to learn it through that. The official guide is a really great way to practice, a really bad way to learn things. Okay. The piece which is there is, achieving that 90th percentile is like almost achieving perfection. And the question is, if you only get 7 to 10 feedback points while learning, how do you achieve perfection? It's just very difficult. Unless and until you're a very diligent student, then yes, some people will, but most will not. Okay. The second thing is you've got to interpret what that feedback tells you as to where you're faltering. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk about these feedback points, but what I want you to do is that, and by the way, you can see these feedback points. Has anyone watched this video on our website? If you go to our homepage, you can click on this and it says 500 points of personalized feedback. We show you how to do that. I mean, if you go to our homepage, whatever I'm saying, you're going to get pretty much all of this in a crux. And you would really see, probably 5 test prep companies talk about GMAT study plan. They don't really illustrate how they go about doing it. It's the website. Go to e-GMAT.com homepage. Scroll down, you're going to really see that. And you can see this is 1 out of 2. So you get concept level and application level feedback. As you click on the other item, you'd see 2 out of 2 application level feedback. Okay. So most of you are probably confused. Talked about sentence correction. Why did I talk about sentence structures? How many of you are wondering, hey, what are these sentence structures that Rajat's talking about here? And no, everyone's okay with that? Everyone understands sentence structures? Yes, no. Can you guys hear me? Okay, one person is. Not really. Okay, you don't understand sentence structures. You guys can hear me. That's good. So what we're going to do is, to illustrate the point about sentence structures, I'm going to make you solve a question. Now, this is a difficult question. And because it's a difficult question, I don't want to time you. And so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to give you a poll. And before I show the question to you, I want you to select still solving. So that way, when you choose an answer choice other than still solving, I know that you've been able to arrive at an answer. So I want about 40 people to say still solving before I show the question. Let's get 40 people to say still solving. 32, 33, 36, 37. 3 more to say still solving. 38. And again, this allows me to time you guys better. That's basically it. Okay. Now you should be able to see the question. Here is the question. I'm going to mute myself. Good luck, guys. All right, but 80% of the class is done. Get those answers in. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. So this is how you guys did. Choice C is the most popular choice. Choice D is very popular, as is choice E. Let me close the poll. And this is where you'd really see how people, make mistakes on a question such as this one, because they use what we call as the wrong way to approach questions. So when you think about this, there aren't that many splits that exist in this question. Why? Because you see this and you say, okay, you have the church coined over here in choices A and D. Oh, what happened to my... You have the church coined here in choices A and D over here. Then you have while in choices B and C, and then you have that over here. You have a contrast word but here, and but here, but it's not in choice C. There are a bunch of other variations as well. So again, I don't know how I can use splits effectively in this. So you've got to really go with the meaning-based approach overall. By the way, if you attend our FC webinar, we're going to show you, we're going to demonstrate how do you solve every question, not just a completely underlined question, but every question using the meaning-based approach. Now, one of the first things you have to do with a meaning-based approach is to pause strategically and really divide the sentence into what we call as logical segments and make sure you understand the meaning completely. Okay, so this is what we call as a sentence structure approach, where you have the sentence structure, and let's read this. The church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day, okay, with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia. That aspect is claimed by a few experts, but it is celebrated on this date to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. That part is the most prevalent belief. So when you look at this, you say, okay, what you want to ask yourself, what is it that the author wants to communicate using this sentence? Again, doesn't matter what errors exist. You want to say, what is the purpose of writing this sentence? And when you do that, the first thing that should jump out to you is that in this sentence, the author wants to communicate two claims or two claims that exist about why February 14th is celebrated as Valentine's Day. Claim one is that the church designated it with a specific motive. Okay. Claim two is that it is to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. Now, these two claims are by two different entities. Claim one is by a few experts. Claim two is the more prevalent belief. How many of you, when you were solving this question, extracted these aspects overall? And again, I'm going to put in a poll question here. It's a multiple response poll, and the poll will say mark the ones that you could not extract. Again, while solving this question, not now. Yeah, if you mark the ones that you could not identify, aspect number 1, aspect number 2, aspect number 3. Which one could you not identify? And if you could not identify, 2 and 3, you can pinpoint 2 and 3 because it's a multiple response. You're not limited to just choosing one. If you could not identify 1, 2, you can really say 1 and 2. If you couldn't identify 1, 2, and 3, you can choose all 3 as well. And again, you see where people faltered, and you'll see how they chose the wrong answer because they did not do this step. This has nothing to do with grammar, by the way. This is just a process, a good habit that you need to inculcate while doing this. And you would see how it directly leads to a mistake that you guys made. Okay, we already did that piece over here. If you were able to understand all 3 and you did that part while solving that question, then congratulations, you did the first piece correct. If you could not identify either 1 or 2 or 1 or 2 aspects, or then you need to build that skill set. Why? Because grammar isn't going to help you. It's this aspect that you need to build first before even learning grammar. Okay. That's And to achieve that 90th percentile, you need that 100% clarity on what the purpose of that sentence is. And the only way you can do that is by doing strategic pausing or by going through the master comprehension course. Okay. Now, since we know what the purpose of that sentence is, we can really figure out what the errors are. And when you see this, you do a basic subject verb analysis. What you really see is, you have subjects, verbs, but then these verbs and this verb over here, they do not have associated subjects. So we have missing subjects, but other than that, this seems fine. Okay. So this is something that you do when you take forward. All right. Now we take the meaning analysis and the error analysis in the original sentence and then review the answer choices one by one. This is choice B. Okay. Over here, the way I'm bringing about is choice B is listed here just as an architecture. Choice A, the original choice is here so that we know what the sentence wants to communicate. And our analysis of the meaning is over here. The various aspects are here. So let's look at choice B. Choice B says, while with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia, a few experts do claim. Who has the ulterior motive? In choice B, the church or the few experts? Who has the ulterior motive here in choice B? B for boy? The few experts. Is that what the author wanted to communicate? No, the church did not. In choice B, while with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia, a few experts do claim. Who's making the claim with an ulterior motive? It's the few experts, according to this sentence, not the church. The church was the intended meaning, what the author intended. In B, it's a few experts. It changes the meaning. Don't even need to read further. That's wrong. So why is choice B wrong over here? First, it logically suggests that claim that, hey, that the few experts present their claim. The motive that the church had, which the author originally wanted to communicate, this is claim 1 over here. That's lost in this. Okay. Because of this, choice B is wrong. Let's look at, and again, you've got to be able to, when it comes to achieving that 90th percentile, you need to have the eye to spot both these distortions. Okay. Now, how did you guys poll? This is how you guys polled. Choice C was the most popular choice. Let's look at choice C here. While a few experts claim that the church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia, their more prevalent belief, as per the meaning, or rather in this case, who's making the second claim? As per choice C, who's making the second claim? The same set of experts. Is that what the author intended to communicate? Why did you choose choice C for those of you who chose choice C? What was your reason for choosing choice C? For those of you who chose choice C, what was your reason? And where did you falter? Check grammar. Had a more, it seemed, the structure seemed better. Looked over the word there, yes. Why did you focus on grammar rather than meaning for this choice? What was the notion that was there in your head when you were reading this answer choice? Or why did you miss this aspect? That the first claim is by a few experts, the second claim is the more prevalent belief, not by a few experts, but another entity. Is it because you don't follow the meaning-based approach as strictly? You don't worry about taking the meaning further as you're evaluating the answer choice? author's intention doesn't matter, right? It's the answer with no grammatical errors. No. Who says? Why do you think GMAT SC? Why do you think the sentence correction as what or the GMAT test sentence correction? I mean, Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai, Larry Page, they don't have perfect grammar, right? And why should an MBA be a grammarian? What is the purpose of testing GMAT sentence correction? Can you guys tell me? What is the one thing? Logical reasoning is actually critical reasoning. What is the one thing that MBAs have to do? What is the one thing that they have to do, and they have to do it right? It's communication. Communicate effectively. Okay. Yes, they do have to discern the facts, but they also have to communicate, and their communication needs to be precise. It doesn't need to be the most elegant. It needs to be precise. And that's why you have GMAT sentence correction. It's about precise communication. Okay. And you'll see that as the next piece in choice D. Okay. So why is choice C wrong? It suggests that the same set of experts share the two stated claims. It's not what the author intended to communicate. It changes the meaning completely. Let's look at choice D. All right. Choice D says the church coined the date February 14 as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia as claimed by a few experts. Okay. But its celebration on this day is to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial, the more prevalent belief. One of the big things when you become an MBA that's going to happen is the blame game. No, this is not correct, and you will see why this is not correct. Okay, the blame game. And I'm going to give you a very simple example. Apple is the market leader, is claimed by Forbes magazine. Are you communicating information here? Yes or no? Yes, you are. You're saying, hey, Apple is the market leader, is claimed by Forbes magazine. So this is yes. Are you making a claim here? Are you making a claim here? No, you're not making a claim. All you're saying is this aspect, Apple is the market leader, that aspect is claimed by Forbes magazine. You're not making a claim here. This is very similar to saying, hey, US News ranks Harvard as the best business school. You're not saying I rank Harvard as the best business school. You're saying US News ranks Harvard as the best business school. Okay. Should you be blamed if it turns out that Apple is not the market leader? Should you be blamed? No. You're merely communicating information. And that's very important. Okay. So are you communicating information? Yes. Are you making a claim? No. Do you bear the burden of blame? Absolutely not. Let's look at another sentence structure. Apple is the market leader as claimed by Forbes magazine. Okay, let's kind of analyze this. This one word makes a huge difference. Are you communicating information? Yes. Are you making a claim here? Absolutely. Yes, Forbes is making a claim, but by using the word as, you are backing that claim. Should you be blamed if it turns out that Apple is not the market leader? Absolutely. Yes. That one word makes a huge difference. Okay. Again, is versus as. Okay. Choice D is wrong on two counts. One is it makes the modifier illogical. The second is it actually adds on the burden of proof. or it adds on the claim to the author. And this is something that's tested very heavily in RC, and it's sometimes tested in SC. So when you say the church coined the date February 14th as claimed by a few experts, the author is actually sharing that claim by himself. Similarly, but its celebration on this date is to honor Valentine's, the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial, the more prevalent belief. The author is saying, there is this more prevalent belief, but I also agree with this. And for those of you who've struggled with RC, you see that. That's kind of the classical inference trap, right? What the author states versus what the author believes. In the original sentence, the author merely stated. In this option, the author believed. Very, very nuanced thing, but very critical if you want to get to that 90th percentile. The correct answer, choice E, that the church coined the date February 14th with an LT is claimed by a few experts. Again, the author himself is not making that claim. The author is merely communicating information. But the more prevalent belief is it is celebrated on this day. Again, the author is not making the claim. Yes, a lot of people think it's wrong. Why? Because that has to be used as a connector. Why do you reject the correct answer choice? Some people say it started with that. It doesn't look elegant. That always has to be used as a connector over here. Okay, in this case. And some people even really say passive voice is wrong and this is claimed as wrong. Again, none of those are essential things in communicating the meaning. If you are a grammarian, you're going to do really badly on the GMAT in hard, especially when it comes to hard questions. You're going to get to that 70th percentile. But beyond that, you're going to do really badly because this is going to happen. And again, come to the next SC session. We're going to demonstrate official questions with sentence structures that are not elegant but are very precise. And all of these things that you think are necessary are not necessary. How many of you think, how many of you really think passive voice is wrong? How many of you have heard this? Passive voice is wrong on the GMAT. You see an answer choice with passive voice, reject it. Why? Has anyone questioned why is passive voice wrong on the GMAT? If it is, to begin with, have you ever questioned that? Or in what scenarios is passive voice wrong? No. More wordy. Why do you think that's the case? Let me give you an example. Why is let me say one thing. When it comes to GMAT verbal, there is nothing called a preference. Anyone who tells you the preference, ask them to show the results that they have delivered. And if they have delivered even 1/10 of the results, then they'll hold some credibility. Let me give you an example to really say. Let me give you an example. Okay. This is active. This is passive. What's wrong in passive, in the passive voice over here? From a grammar standpoint, nothing's wrong. Yes, the object's missing. Passive voice, the subject, the doer is missing. Passive voice often communicates incomplete information. The snake was killed. You don't know Ram. Who killed the snake? And which is why if the author intended to communicate the doer of the action and that's not there in passive voice, you have a problem. It's all got to do with meaning. Okay. How many of you have heard the notion that being is wrong? Again, remember, this is not an SC session. Those questions, you can answer those in SC sessions. But I just want to make sure you understand the notion that On the GMAT, there are very few hard rules. Okay. Being is wrong. You see an answer choice with being. When I guess, I avoid being. Okay. You see an answer choice with being, you do that. How many of you are aiming for that 90th percentile in SC? Okay. Now, what does 90th percentile mean? Just mathematically, what does it mean? Can you translate that 90th percentile? That you're going to be 1 in 10 students. Only 10% are at the same level or higher than you. Okay. If you want to achieve 90th percentiles in SC, are you likely to see something that's statistically not very significant? Are you likely to see a construction that many people get wrong? Yes. Yes, you are likely to see that because you're going to see questions that are not served to many people. I mean, we just talked about the computer adaptive test. That's the translation of this, right? So should you apply stats in sentence correction? Absolutely not. Leave stats to stats. Same thing in CR. Some people say, hey, choose an answer choice which has, reject an answer choice that has every, all in CR. No, don't do that. Or don't aim for that 90th percentile. Okay, just these two things don't gel. You are likely to get those statistically less likely answer choices as the correct versions over there. And I'm actually shocked that people still propagate that myth. We wrote an article in 2014 talking about being. I think we have this somewhere. So yeah. Now, choice B, C, and D. Choice A had a subject verb error, right? They're missing subjects, but B, C, and D grammatically absolutely perfect. Nothing wrong with them. The only problem was meaning distortion. Okay. So it's really important to have the right approach if you want to solve 700 level questions. Without having that right approach, you won't be able to solve 700 level questions. But then you were asking about the 200 odd sentence structures. Can you see these sentence structures? You saw about 8 to 9 sentence structures in just one SC question. Each answer choice had a couple of sentence structures in there because you had compound sentences there. Can you see those sentence structures that existed? And mastering these sentence structures, understanding that level of, the usage of as and how it changes the meaning, that's what leads to that 90th percentile. Okay. So 3 stages of learning: right foundation, right method with refinement. That needs to be there. And to get to that, you need, and to achieve that 90th percentile, you need to achieve precision at each of these stages, and which is where feedback's really important. So how do we give feedback? Let's kind of look at this over here. And how many of you have gone through our SC course? Okay. Do you get scores at the end of this? That's feedback. And that's feedback that's really important. Why? Because if you act upon it, you do the stage 1 well. If you don't act upon it, it's like building that brick wall where the bricks are not aligned properly. Some bricks are coming out and others are a bit more embedded in there. That's feedback, and that feedback's really valuable. Now you guys see your scores, you guys see your time tracked. In addition to that, each learning activity that you see on the e-GMAT platform gives us about 70 data points. And anyone a techie over here? Anyone who's a techie over here? So if you actually go look at your browser when you're going through, let's say, a verb ing modifier file or an inference file, you can see those 70 points in the browser debugger going through to our platform. And that feedback's composed on those 70 points. And why is that feedback important? The reason why that feedback's important is because you want to normalize your ability. So when 1,000 people go through the learning part of our platform, which is either the SC course or the number properties course, we want to make sure that you've not learned to 1,000 different degrees. We want to make sure that each one of you has learned to a certain minimum threshold if you act upon that feedback. And that for us is very important. Why? Because if you don't learn to that threshold, then essentially you falter during the cementing stage. And if you falter during the cementing stage, there's no way you can hit 90th percentile ability. That just doesn't happen. So, and because you've seen data with places where we don't get feedback. So, a typical course has video files. Those videos don't give you feedback. And essentially when a 30th percentile student starts that course, he may end up with a 60th percentile beyond that course, or he may end up remaining at that 40th percentile or so. Okay. And essentially, bottom line is there's a huge variation in the input and output. With our platform, if you make use of that feedback, you may start at a various ability levels, but you'd always achieve a certain minimum threshold if you act upon it. If you don't act upon this feedback, then that feedback's not very useful. So if you hit a 60% in one of the files, and if you revise those concepts right away, you would see that you do really well in the next file. If you don't revise those concepts, you would continue to falter. There was a student who really said, I did really well in the concept quizzes, but practice is where I falter. Again, that's a classical symptom of you not revising the application file feedback, and then you do poorly in those practice scores. And that's what causes this. I mean, our methods are different, but it's the feedback, it's the precision that people take into account, and when they do that revision, that's what causes these high scores. Okay, and that's where technology is really relevant when it comes to test prep. Anyone over here who's done a CFA or a PMP certification? Yes. How does a certification differ from test prep, such as the GMAT? Can you tell me just in principle, what's the difference there? Oh, you can prepare for it in a day? I didn't know you could prepare for PMP in a day. Thank you for letting me know. I've not done a PMP, by the way. No, it's not about feedback. When you think about a certification, all you care about is achieving a certain level, right? As long as you pass, you pass. There are no brownie points at least as far as I understand. If you achieve if your threshold is 70th%, you achieve a 71 or you achieve a 99. It's the same, right? As long as you're certified, you're certified. There is no 99th percentile certified or 90th percentile certified when it comes to PMP, when it comes to CFA. Am I correct? There are no levels of, there's nothing like a 99th percentile, right? So as long as you cross a threshold, that's it. On the GMAT or on the GRE or on the SAT, a 99th percentile student gets way more advantage, a much greater advantage than a 90th percentile student, or a 700 versus a 770. They're completely different ball games, and which is why this feedback's really important. Okay. So just in the context for SC, you get these many feedback points. At concept level, you get about 75 personalized feedback points. At application level, you get about 23 personalized feedback points. When you're doing cementing, you get another 30 to 50 feedback points. And then refining to perfection and maintaining performance, you get about 8 to 20 feedback points depending on how many quizzes that you do. Now, with PACE, you would start seeing personalized courses as well. Okay. And let's see some of these feedback points in action and the impact that they have. Here's the simplest module in the SC course, the subject verb module. There are a few things that you would notice. What's the sum of all feedback points? Up to 800 right now, depending on, again, how many subsections you do. Some people do 3 out of 8, others do 8 out of 8. If you do 8 out of 8, you'd probably get to about 800 odd feedback points or so. Okay, so let's see how this matters. Here's a student who went through the subject verb module. It's one of the simplest modules over here. There are a few things that you would notice. One is you get feedback on every learning activity. This is not completion status. Okay, this is the completion status is this tick over here. This is the score that you have. This is the system's evaluation of how effectively you've done this. This is not the length of the video. This is the time that you've spent on learning activity. We track all of that. Now in this learning activity in SV application, this guy spent 47 minutes. He scored 60%. But then he did really well over here. The reason he did really well was because he revised his mistakes, which is why the 47 minutes here is really important. Now let's look at another module, the verb tenses module. Again, you see the intense files, 64 minutes spent over here, 48 minutes spent over here, and really good scores, 83% and 80% over here. And these are important. Why? Because this guy did not go off watching YouTube during this time. He spent that, he was diligent, and you can see a consistent string of very high scores here. Again, conditional verb, you can see the time spent. Now this guy scored just 64% over here, but then this piece you can't see, which is an official set of official questions, he scored 100%. How did he achieve that? It's because he did a bunch of revision here. How do we know this? Because as you go in here, you can see he's bookmarked the questions that he made mistakes on, and he spent time revising those. And that's the value of feedback and good study habits. Now, if there were no practice quizzes here, if there were no feedback here, he would not have done that revision. He would have faltered. And imagine doing this 100 times just in the context of SC. And imagine getting that feedback. Imagine the number of gaps that you would close. And that's kind of the difference between achieving that 90th percentile versus staying at that 60th percentile. Why? Because both, 60th percentile guy would do reasonably good job in medium difficulty questions. But it's when these questions become medium hard and hard, that's where you start to falter. And that's where the 90th percentile guy gains over you. Okay. Here's a quote that he says, for me, the biggest thing was the application of concepts. My concepts weren't bad in my first 2 attempts, but he lacked the knowledge. Essentially, he didn't get feedback. He didn't refine those things in the first 2 concepts. He knew the first 2 attempts, he knew the concepts. Okay. So with that, that's kind of all that I want to talk about today. I want to thank you for joining me today. Again, the key thing over here is that make sure you have that personalized study plan. And that's really important because that allows you to focus and gives you that shortest path and the most likely path towards a 730 score. Okay. Then make sure you start your learning with the right stage. If you have a slow ability, start with learning concepts and then learning applications. If you have a high ability, start with mastering application. If you have an uber high ability, you can start with refining to perfection. At every stage, use feedback. Without feedback, you won't be precise. Without feedback, you will always have uncertainty. All right. With that, make use of these features. And if you are in that 680 or higher zone, let us know. We'll push you put in the last mile push program or so. Thank you. And let me actually share the file with you. And again, feedback and your questions over here. Why did we rule out option A? The reason we ruled out option A was because it had missing subjects. Let me bring in. And if you want to know more about feedback, you can click on some of these links over here. Okay. Victor says on the GMAT, does the GMAT count nearly as much as academics? I think it counts a lot more based on the stats that we have seen. So academics, schools have a certain bare minimum academics and you can make up for academics using the low GMAT score. I've not seen people make up for a low GMAT score using academics. So yeah. Upcoming sessions, we have the geometry session and we have the meaning and logic session. Okay. All right. If you have any questions, you can put those in the Q&A pod. Otherwise, algebra session tomorrow, make sure you make use of it. If you need help in inequalities and absolute value. Also, Make sure you take a look at the free trial and go through the content with regards to subject verbs, actually, modifiers, and pre-thinking assumptions, and so on and so forth. Session PDF. Let me see if I can share that with you. Here's the session PDF. You guys can download that. Where can you find Expert AI? Expert AI is embedded all through the platform. So that feedback that you get, it's built around Expert AI is the envelope around that. When you take quizzes in Scholarinium, you get stuff such as Luck Factor, Rush Through Factor. That's powered by Expert AI. The PACE engine is powered by Expert AI. It's an addition to PACE, to Expert AI as well. So it's not a tool per se. It's something it's in many ways it's the soul of our technology platform. So it's omnipresent. Again, if you click on Expert AI Maximize Score Improvement, you can click on this, watch the video. You can also click on the atomic learning paths to see that. All right, I have another question. How long would it take if I want to improve from a 600 to a 730? Again, as I said, you've got to build that study plan, take that Sigma X mock. Let me share that link as well. But typically, you're looking at anywhere between 120 to 150 hours. Now, where you need to put in those hours depends on that personalized study plan. Here is the link to Sigma X mock. All right. With that, if there are no other questions, I want to thank you guys for joining me today. It was wonderful having you, and I look forward to seeing you on e-GMAT.com. Happy learning.